What are we discussing on today's podcast, Wes? Can the D-backs still make the postseason? Breaking down their odds and chances on today's podcast. And then part two with Sully Baseball of Locked On MLB, looking at some of the American League teams that have been disastrous post-trade deadline, including Shohei Ohtani and the Los Angeles Angels. Discussing all that on today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day listening to. Always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, MillardThomas24.downmyportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, just follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for my personal account, or just look up Locked On Diamondbacks both Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first to listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. One of those platforms is YouTube, so please hit subscribe on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel. And for the audience today, the YouTube audience, you will hear the video of me discussing the D-back chances of making the postseason. But for the audio audience, you will hear everything. Part two with Sully Baseball and this conversation I'm about to have. For the YouTube audience, go to the YouTube channel to see all the videos. I have everything laid out there. But let's jump right into it now and discuss the D-back chances of still making the postseason. Because if you can believe it, the D-backs at one point during the year were one of the favorites to make the postseason. Yes, I know that feels really unbelievable with how this D-backs team has played over the last couple months, because if you can go back in the time machine for a little bit, reverse time back to June 12th, flip the calendar back a couple months. On June 12th, the D-backs were 41-25. They were 16 games above 500. And according to Fangraphs, they had an 80% chance of making the postseason. And as it currently stands, the D-backs are just one game above 500. They've been free falling out the standings since that June 12th date. They've been getting swept left and right. They've been getting shut out in these ball games. The offense has struggled to score. The bullpen has given up runs. Zach Gallen has looked shaky at times. Everything we knew about the D-backs from late March to mid-June, that was a whole different team than what we've seen from mid-June to early August. It's two different ball clubs, and that first ball club was one of the best teams in baseball. The second ball club has been one of the worst teams in baseball, and the question for the D-backs is, can they get back to that first ball club? Because that first ball club is a team that makes the postseason. How the D-backs are playing right now, if they continue this pace, the D-backs are not going to be anywhere near the postseason, because with the inclusion of the third wildcard spot, this is only the second season of the third wildcard spot, of course, increases the chances the D-backs make the postseason. But I believe the D-backs do want to make the postseason. The minimum amount of wins that they probably need to make the playoffs is 87. Where did I get that number from? I just pulled up last year's wildcard standings, and the last team to make the playoffs was the Philadelphia Phillies with 87 wins. So I'm using that as just the barometer for the minimum amount of wins your team probably needs to make the postseason. I'm thinking around 87 is going to be enough to get that final wild card spot again for the D-backs. And with the D-backs at 57 wins, I think we can all do that math very quickly. The D-backs have to win 30 more games the rest of the season to get to that 87 win mark. Now, the question is, how many games are left the rest of the year? I believe the number is 48. So the D-backs have to go 30-18 the rest of the way to get to that 87 win mark. Now, that might seem impossible with how the D-backs have been playing. The D-backs can definitely play at above a 12 game above 500 stretch. They can do it because we saw them do it for a 3-month stretch, but it's going to be tough for the D-backs to do it. And as of right now, for the rest of the season, Fangraphs is only putting the D-backs chances of making the postseason at 21%. It's currently below teams like the Cincinnati Reds, the Chicago Cubs, the Miami Marlins. They're basically the last good team in the wild card mix has a realistic chance of making the postseason. They basically have the worst odds of all the good wild card teams have a realistic chance of making it. Of all the non-teams that are like 8 games back, the D-backs have the worst chance of making the postseason of those teams. So for them to do it, for them to go 30-18 the rest of their way would be pretty tough and pretty impossible, because I was looking at the D-backs schedule the rest of the way. Even if you give the D-backs a win in every odd series and split every even series, that's not even enough. So what does that even mean? For every 3-game series, I gave the D-backs 2 wins. And for every 2-game or 4-game series, I just made it an even split. And even if you do that the rest of the way, where the D-backs don't lose one series for the rest of the season, that still only gets the D-backs to 28 wins. So even if the D-backs don't lose a series for the rest of the year, they still don't get enough wins to crack 87. So the D-backs are not only going to have to go on a really hot tear, they're going to have to get some sweeps here. They're going to have to put together some winning streaks here, some streaks of winning, some sequences of winning together. And it's not going to be easy because of how bad they've been playing. It just doesn't seem very feasible, but it is possible for the D-backs. But to do it, you're going to need, the rookie of the year, Corbin Carroll, to get back on track. He's got like a 720 OPS in the second half of the season. He needs to get back. Gurriel has been really hot the last week and a half, but still post All-Star break, he's still at like a 620 OPS. Tommy Pham has yet to wake up. We need some of those McCarthys and Alec Thomases to get better in the second half as well. Perdomo would be nice if he woke up. Zach Gallen has like a 4.6 ERA in the second half of the season. He needs to be better. The bullpen ERA in the first half was a flat 4. In the second half, the bullpen ERA is above a 7. They need to be better as well. This team offense in the second half of the season has a below a 700 OPS in the second half. The team offense has not been good. They've been able to get runners in scoring position opportunities the last 4 games, but have not been able to convert those opportunities at all. This D-backs team needs to get better in pretty much every phase of the ball game, and they have to do it soon, because you got teams like the Chicago Cubs, teams like the San Diego Padres are coming. Like the Cubs were at one point, I mean, if you just look at the All-Star break, the Cubs, even at the All-Star break, were still a team that was like, they're on the outside looking in. I'm not really taking the Chicago Cubs that seriously. And Sully Baseball was telling me, watch out for the Cubs. Don't sleep on the Cubs. And guess what? I was slumped on the Cubs. And now, even with a Stroman on the injured list, they are just winning a whole bunch of ball games. Candelario was a nice addition. Cody Bellinger is quite literally having a career season. It might be the best season we've ever seen from Cody Bellinger. Like, I need the D-backs to go get that man this offseason, throw him in right field, because he's been phenomenal for the Cubs this year. I can't let the San Diego Padres pass the D-backs in the standings. Like, you can't have this whole season where I'm doing all these weekly crossovers with Javier Reyes, where I'm making fun of the Padres, and then the Padres end the season ahead of the D-backs. That absolutely cannot happen. So I need the D-backs to get better. My only issue is, who is going to step up and be the leader for this D-backs team? I don't just mean offensively at the plate. I just don't mean from a pitching perspective on the mound. I mean, who's going to be the vocal leader, the emotional leader? Back during that 2018 World Series, Chris Sale, when the Red Sox were struggling, gathered everyone together and just ripped the heads off every player in that clubhouse. And that is what a leader does. Matt Bum in his prime used to get that team fired up with his actions, with the way he left it all out on the line. He wore his heart on the sleeve, and he just was fired up during those postseason stretch runs for the Giants. And who's going to be the emotional, the vocal leader for this team in the clubhouse? We need someone to step up, because I don't like what our leadership is saying from the Torey Lovellos and the Mike Hazens of the world. I don't think we could look at them to get this D-backs clubhouse fired up. So which player is going to get it done? Is it going to be the Ketel Martes, the Lourdes Gurriel, the Corbin Carrolls, the Zach Allen, the Merrill Kelly? Is it going to be a young guy? Is it going to be a veteran? I don't know who it is, but the D-backs need a leader to rally everyone together and get the boys fired up.